In the marble corridors of Blackwood Manor, where power and prestige have ruled for centuries, a single discovery by a loyal guard threatens to unravel a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. What started as routine maintenance work beneath the desk of Lord Chancellor Marcus Blackwood has revealed something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. The second recording device wasn't just placed there by accident, it was part of a carefully orchestrated plan that has been years in the making. As Security Chief Elena Rodriguez holds the small, sophisticated piece of technology in her trembling hands, she realizes that everything she thought she knew about her employer, her job, and her own safety was about to change forever. Part 1. Security Chief Elena Rodriguez had worked at Blackwood Manor for 12 years, and in all that time, she had never seen anything that truly unsettled her. The sprawling estate served as both the private residence and official workspace for Lord Chancellor Marcus Blackwood, one of the most powerful political figures in the country. Elena had been handpicked for her position not just because of her impeccable military background, but because of her unwavering loyalty and her ability to keep secrets. The morning started like any other. Elena arrived at the manor at precisely 6 a.m, conducting her usual security sweep of the grounds. The October air was crisp and fog still clung to the ancient oak trees that lined the estate's perimeter. She checked in with the night shift guards, reviewed the security logs, and began her routine inspection of the main building. It was during her sweep of the Lord Chancellor's private study that she noticed something unusual. The heavy mahogany desk, a family heirloom that had belonged to the Blackwood family for over 2 centuries, seemed to be sitting slightly askew. Elena had an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive, and she noticed immediately that the desk had been moved, even if only by a few inches. Lord Chancellor Blackwood was known for his meticulous nature. Everything in his study had its place, and nothing was ever out of order. The fact that his desk had been disturbed was immediately concerning to Elena. She approached the massive piece of furniture carefully, running her hands along its edges, looking for any signs of tampering. At first, she found nothing. The desk appeared to be in perfect condition, its dark wood polished to a mirror shine. But as she knelt down to examine the underside more carefully, her fingers brushed against something that shouldn't have been there. It was small, no larger than a coin, and it was attached to the bottom of the desk with what appeared to be industrial-strength adhesive. Elena's training immediately kicked in. She knew a surveillance device when she saw one, and this was definitely not standard security equipment. The device was sleek, modern, and bore no identifying marks that would indicate it was part of the manor's official security system. Someone had placed this here without authorization, and that someone had access to one of the most secure rooms in the building. Her mind raced as she carefully photographed the device from multiple angles before attempting to remove it. The adhesive was strong, but with patience and the right tools from her security kit, she managed to extract it without damaging either the device or the desk. As she held it up to the light streaming through the study's tall windows, she could see that it was far more sophisticated than any standard listening device she had encountered. The implications were staggering. Someone had been monitoring the Lord Chancellor's private conversations, possibly for weeks or even months. Every confidential meeting, every sensitive phone call, every private discussion that had taken place in this room could have been compromised. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the scope of what this meant. But as she continued her investigation, her concern turned to outright alarm. Hidden behind one of the desk's ornate legs, she found a second device. This one was different from the first, smaller and more discreet, but clearly designed for the same purpose. 2 surveillance devices in the same location suggested something far more serious than a simple case of espionage. Elena's hands were shaking slightly as she removed the second device. She had dealt with security breaches before, but nothing of this magnitude. The fact that someone had been able to infiltrate the Lord Chancellor's private study not once, but twice, suggested either a massive failure in the security system she had spent years perfecting, or something much worse. She thought about Lord Chancellor Blackwood, a man she had come to respect and admire during her years of service. He was known for his integrity, his dedication to public service, and his unwavering commitment to doing what was right for the country. The idea that someone was spying on him was deeply disturbing, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The devices themselves raised numerous questions. They were clearly expensive, professional-grade equipment that would not be available to amateur surveillance enthusiasts. Whoever had placed them here had significant resources and sophisticated knowledge of electronics and security systems. This was not the work of a disgruntled employee or a curious journalist. Elena carefully placed both devices in evidence bags and sealed them according to protocol. She would need to have them analyzed by the estate's technical security team, but she suspected that the results would only deepen the mystery. These devices were too advanced to provide easy answers about their origin or purpose. As she stood in the Lord Chancellor's study surrounded by the trappings of power and privilege, Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was the only person who knew about this discovery, and the decisions she made in the next few hours could have far-reaching consequences. Should she inform Lord Chancellor Blackwood immediately? Should she conduct a broader investigation first? Should she contact outside authorities? The grandfather clock in the corner of the study chimed 8 o'clock, and Elena realized that Lord Chancellor Blackwood would be arriving for work within the hour. She needed to make a decision quickly, but she also needed to be absolutely certain about her next steps. One wrong move could compromise whatever investigation might follow, or worse, it could put people in danger. Elena made her way to her office, a small but well-equipped space adjacent to the main security control room. She locked the evidence bags in her personal safe and sat down at her desk to think. The weight of the discovery was beginning to sink in, and she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about the security of Blackwood Manor. How long had the devices been there? Who had placed them? What information had already been compromised? And perhaps most importantly, was Lord Chancellor Blackwood the target of this surveillance, or was he somehow involved in it? Elena hated herself for even considering the latter possibility, but her training had taught her to examine every angle, no matter how uncomfortable. She pulled up the security logs on her computer and began reviewing the records from the past several weeks. Every entry and exit to the manor was meticulously documented. Every visitor was logged and escorted. Every delivery was inspected and recorded. On the surface, everything appeared normal, but Elena knew that whoever had placed those devices had found a way to circumvent the very security measures she had put in place. The sound of vehicles arriving in the courtyard below told Elena that Lord Chancellor Blackwood's morning entourage was approaching. She watched from her window as the familiar convoy of black cars pulled up to the main entrance. Lord Chancellor Blackwood emerged from the lead vehicle, his tall frame unmistakable even from a distance. He moved with the confident stride of a man accustomed to wielding power, seemingly unaware that his most private sanctuary had been compromised. Elena's phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Thomas Morrison, the head of the Lord Chancellor's personal security detail, calling to inform her of his arrival. Elena found herself struggling to maintain her usual professional composure as she acknowledged the call and confirmed that the building was secure. But was it really secure? The discovery of the surveillance devices had shattered Elena's confidence in the very systems she had spent years developing and refining. If someone could place recording equipment in the Lord Chancellor's private study without detection, what else might they be capable of? Were there other devices she hadn't found? Were there security vulnerabilities she hadn't considered? As she ended the call with Thomas, Elena realized that she was facing the most challenging situation of her career. The decision she made in the coming hours would not only affect her own future, but could have implications for national security. She took a deep breath, steeled herself for what lay ahead, and began to formulate a plan. The discovery of the devices was just the beginning. Elena had a feeling that whatever truth lay behind their placement would be far more disturbing than simple espionage. As she prepared to take the first steps in what promised to be a complex and dangerous investigation, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something that powerful people would kill to keep hidden. Part 2. Elena spent the next hour poring over security footage, her eyes burning from staring at the multiple monitors that lined her office wall. She had access to recordings from every camera in Blackwood Manor, covering every angle of every room except for Lord Chancellor Blackwood's private quarters and bathroom, which were off-limits even to security personnel for privacy reasons. What she discovered made her stomach turn. The recording showed no unauthorized entry into the Lord Chancellor's study. Every person who had entered that room in the past month was either Lord Chancellor Blackwood himself, his personal assistant Margaret Chen, or members of the cleaning staff who had been with the manor for years. But someone had to have placed those devices, which meant that either the cameras had been tampered with or someone with legitimate access was involved. Elena's mind recoiled from the implications. Margaret Chen had been Lord Chancellor Blackwood's assistant for over 8 years. She was a middle-aged woman with an impeccable reputation and a security clearance that had been renewed just 6 months ago. The cleaning staff were all long-term employees who had undergone extensive background checks. The idea that any of them could be involved in surveillance operations seemed impossible, but Elena's training had taught her that the impossible was often exactly what happened in situations like this. She pulled up the personnel files for everyone who had access to the study, scrutinizing them with fresh eyes. Margaret Chen had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard with a degree in political science. She had worked for several high-profile politicians before joining Lord Chancellor Blackwood's team. Her background check showed no red flags, no financial difficulties, no personal connections that might make her vulnerable to compromise. The cleaning staff files were equally clean. Maria Santos had been with the manor for 15 years. She was a single mother of 3 who sent money back to her family in Guatemala. Her loyalty to the Blackwood family was unquestioned. She had even worked through her own mother's illness rather than take time off. The other members of the cleaning team had similar profiles, long-term employees with clean records and strong motivation to keep their well-paying jobs. Elena was beginning to feel frustrated when her secure phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was blocked, which was unusual but not unheard of in her line of work. She answered with her standard greeting, but the voice on the other end made her blood run cold. "Ms. Rodriguez, I understand you've found something interesting in the Lord Chancellor's study." The voice was electronically distorted, making it impossible to determine if the speaker was male or female, young or old. "I think we should meet." Elena's training kicked in immediately. She began recording the call while simultaneously tracing the number, though she suspected it would lead nowhere. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" "Rodriguez. The right question is whether you want to know the truth about what you've discovered or whether you want to become another casualty in a game you don't understand." The line went dead before Elena could respond. She stared at her phone for several seconds, her mind racing. Someone had been watching her, knew about her discovery of the surveillance devices, and had her direct secure line. This was no longer just about unauthorized surveillance. This was about something much more dangerous. Elena immediately initiated lockdown protocols for her communication systems and began a sweep for any surveillance devices in her own office. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made her look over her shoulder. Her sweep revealed nothing, but Elena wasn't reassured. If someone could place advanced surveillance equipment in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's study without detection, they could certainly do the same in her office. She would have to assume that all of her communications were compromised from this point forward. A soft knock at her door made Elena jump. She looked up to see Margaret Chen standing in the doorway, her usual warm smile replaced by an expression of concern. "Elena, is everything all right? You look pale." Margaret's voice carried its usual note of genuine caring, but Elena found herself analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for signs of deception. "I'm fine, Margaret. Just dealing with some routine security issues." Elena tried to keep her voice level, professional, but she could feel the suspicion creeping into her tone. Margaret stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. "Elena, We've known each other for years. I can tell when something is seriously wrong. What's going on?" Elena studied Margaret's face, looking for any sign that this concern was manufactured. Margaret Shen had always been one of the most trustworthy people at the manor, someone Elena had come to consider a friend as well as a colleague. But the discovery of the surveillance devices and the anonymous phone call had shattered Elena's ability to trust anyone. "Have you noticed anything unusual in the Lord Chancellor's study lately? Any changes, any disruptions to his routine?" Elena asked carefully. Margaret frowned, considering the question. "Actually, yes. Yesterday morning when I arrived, I noticed that his desk had been moved slightly. I thought perhaps the cleaning crew had bumped into it, but when I asked Maria about it, she said she hadn't touched the desk at all." "Why do you ask?" Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Margaret's observation confirmed that the desk had been moved recently, but it also raised new questions. If Margaret was involved in placing the surveillance devices, why would she volunteer information that could implicate her? Unless, of course, she was trying to deflect suspicion by appearing helpful. "I'm conducting a routine security review," Elena said, hating how the lie felt on her tongue. "Just making sure all of our protocols are being followed properly." Margaret nodded, but Elena could see concern lingering in her eyes. "Elena, if there's something wrong, something that could affect Lord Chancellor Blackwood's safety, you need to tell me. My job is to protect him, and I can't do that if I'm kept in the dark." Before Elena could respond, her computer chimed with an incoming encrypted message. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart skip a beat. The message was from an account she didn't recognize, but the subject line made her blood run cold. "Check the Lord Chancellor's private residence. Third device. You're running out of time." There was no body text, just an attachment, a high-resolution photograph that showed another surveillance device, this one apparently located in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's private quarters. The image quality was excellent, clearly showing the device attached to the underside of what appeared to be a bedside table. Margaret noticed Elena's reaction immediately. "What is it? What's wrong?" Elena stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. Someone had not only placed surveillance devices in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's study, but had also compromised his private living space. Worse yet, someone had access to his personal quarters and was able to photograph the evidence. The security breach was far more extensive than she had initially realized. But how could she verify this information without compromising Lord Chancellor Blackwood's privacy or alerting potential conspirators to her investigation? His private quarters were strictly off-limits to all security personnel except in cases of immediate physical danger. Elena would need his explicit permission to conduct a search, and asking for that permission would require explaining why she suspected surveillance equipment had been placed there. "Elena, you're scaring me." "What's in that message?" Margaret's voice was tight with worry. Elena made a decision that she hoped she wouldn't regret. "Margaret, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential. I've discovered something that could have serious implications for Lord Chancellor Blackwood's security." She turned her computer screen so that Margaret could see the photograph. Margaret's face went white as she absorbed what she was looking at. Is that a surveillance device in his bedroom?" Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. "I believe so, and it's not the first one I've found." Elena quickly filled Margaret in on her discovery of the devices in the study, carefully watching her reaction for any sign of prior knowledge or deception. Margaret sank into a chair, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Who would do this? Who could get access to his private quarters without us knowing? Elena had been asking herself the same questions, and the answers she was coming up with were all terrifying. Someone with intimate knowledge of our security systems, someone who knows our protocols and procedures well enough to circumvent them. You think it's someone on the inside? It wasn't a question. I think we have to consider that possibility. Elena pulled up the security footage from Lord Chancellor Blackwood's private quarters, but as expected, there were no cameras in his bedroom or personal spaces. Whoever had placed the device there had done so knowing that their activities wouldn't be recorded. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see her mind working through the implications. Finally, she looked up with an expression of grim determination. What do we do? How do we protect him if we can't trust anyone? Elena appreciated Margaret's immediate focus on Lord Chancellor Blackwood's safety, but she was still not entirely convinced that Margaret herself could be trusted. The anonymous caller had known about her discovery almost immediately after she found the devices. That suggested either extensive surveillance capabilities or inside information. First, we need to verify whether there really is a device in his private quarters, Elena said. Then we need to figure out who has been placing these devices and why. How do we check his bedroom without violating his privacy or alerting whoever is behind this? Margaret asked. Elena was about to respond when her secure phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Lord Chancellor Blackwood's personal number. Elena answered immediately. Elena, I need you in my study immediately. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's voice was calm but carried an undertone of urgency that Elena had rarely heard before. On my way, sir. Elena ended the call and looked at Margaret. He wants to see me. Stay here and don't discuss this with anyone until I get back. As Elena made her way through the manor's corridors toward the Lord Chancellor's study, she wondered what had prompted the urgent summons. Had he discovered something himself? Had someone else contacted him? Or worse, had he somehow learned about her investigation and was preparing to confront her about it? The walk to his study felt longer than usual, and Elena found herself checking every shadow, every doorway for potential threats. The anonymous caller's warning about becoming another casualty echoed in her mind, and she realized that her investigation had put her in serious danger. When she reached the study, she found Lord Chancellor Blackwood standing by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. He turned as she entered, and Elena was struck by the change in his appearance. His usually immaculate composure was cracked, and there was something in his eyes that looked very much like fear. Elena, close the door and take a seat. We need to talk. W.F. Part 3. Lord Chancellor Marcus Blackwood moved away from the window as Elena closed the door behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the silence in the room felt heavy with unspoken tension. Elena had known Marcus Blackwood for 12 years, had seen him navigate political crises that would have destroyed lesser men, but she had never seen him look as troubled as he did in that moment. Elena, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to give me a completely honest answer. His voice was steady, but Elena could hear the underlying strain. Have you discovered anything unusual in this room recently? How much did he know? Had someone already informed him about her discovery? Or was he asking because he had suspicions of his own? She made a quick decision to tell him the truth, or at least part of it. I found 2 surveillance devices attached to your desk during my morning security sweep. She watched his face carefully as she delivered this information, looking for any reaction that might give her insight into his level of involvement or knowledge. Lord Chancellor Blackwood closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, a gesture Elena had seen him make countless times during difficult political negotiations. When he opened his eyes again, she was surprised to see what looked like relief. Thank God you found them, he said quietly. I was beginning to think I was losing my mind. Sir, I don't understand. Lord Chancellor Blackwood walked to his desk and sat down heavily in his leather chair. Elena, for the past several weeks I've had the distinct impression that my private conversations were somehow being monitored. Nothing I could put my finger on, just a feeling that information I had shared only in this room was somehow making its way to people who shouldn't have had access to it. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recording device. 3 days ago, I started recording my own conversations, hoping to catch whoever was leaking information. What I discovered was far more disturbing than simple espionage. Elena watched as he connected the device to his computer and pulled up an audio file. This is from yesterday afternoon. I was meeting with Defense Secretary Harrison about the proposed military budget cuts. Listen carefully to what happens about 10 minutes into the conversation. The audio quality was excellent, and Elena could clearly hear both men's voices as they discussed classified budgetary information. But about 10 minutes into the recording, just as Lord Chancellor Blackwood had indicated, there was a subtle but distinct change in the audio quality. It was brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it was unmistakably there. "Did you hear that?" Lord Chancellor Blackwood asked. "That slight distortion in the audio?" She had indeed heard it, and her technical training told her exactly what it meant. Someone was remotely accessing a surveillance device during your conversation. That distortion was caused by the device switching from passive recording to active transmission. Creed, exactly, which means that someone was not only recording my conversation but was also listening to it in real time. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's voice carried a note of anger that Elena had rarely heard before. The question is who, and more importantly, why? Lord Chancellor Blackwood was clearly not involved in the surveillance operation. He was as much a victim as anyone else, but his revelations also deepened the mystery significantly. If someone was monitoring his conversations in real time, it suggested a level of sophistication and resources that went far beyond simple political espionage. "Sir, there's something else you need to know." Elena pulled out her phone and showed him the photograph she had received. "Someone sent me this image about 30 minutes ago. It appears to show another surveillance device in your private quarters." Lord Chancellor Blackwood studied the image with the focused intensity that had made him one of the most effective political figures in the country. After a moment, he looked up with an expression of grim recognition. "That's my bedroom," he confirmed. "And that device is attached to the table where I keep my personal phone and my private correspondence." He was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Elena, someone has been monitoring not just my official conversations, but my personal communications as well. They know everything about my schedule, my relationships, my private thoughts." Elena felt a chill as she realized the full scope of what they were dealing with. "Sir, with respect, I think we need to consider the possibility that your life may be in danger. This level of surveillance suggests something far more serious than political opposition research." Lord Chancellor Blackwood nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. But Elena, there's something else you need to know, something that makes this situation even more complicated." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I've been receiving threatening messages." Elena felt her blood turn to ice. What kind of threatening messages? When did they start? At first, they were subtle, could have been interpreted as political criticism, but they've become progressively more specific and more personal. Lord Chancellor Blackwood opened another file on his computer. "This is the most recent one, which I received this morning." Elena read the message on the screen, and her hands began to shake. The message was brief but chilling. "We know about the Meridian Project. You have 48 hours to announce your resignation or the information goes public. After that, we can't guarantee your safety or the safety of those close to you." Elena asked, though she suspected from Lord Chancellor Blackwood's expression that she wouldn't like the answer. Lord Chancellor Blackwood was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him struggling with how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "The Meridian Project was a classified intelligence operation that I helped coordinate 5 years ago. It involved the elimination of several international terrorist leaders who were planning attacks on civilian targets." Elena felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to come together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. "You think someone connected to the terrorists is behind the surveillance and the threats? It's possible. The Meridian Project was extremely classified, known only to a handful of people at the highest levels of government. If that information has been compromised, it could have come from someone with access to the most sensitive intelligence files in the country." Elena's mind was racing as she processed this information. If Lord Chancellor Blackwood was being targeted by international terrorists or their sympathizers, the security implications were staggering, but something about the situation still didn't add up. "Sir, if this is about the Meridian Project, why haven't the terrorists simply released the information publicly? Why give you an ultimatum?" And why go to the trouble of placing sophisticated surveillance equipment instead of just making their demands? Lord Chancellor Blackwood considered her questions. Those are excellent points, Elena. The more I think about it, the more I suspect that this isn't really about terrorism at all. I think someone is using the Meridian Project as leverage for something else entirely. Before Elena could respond, her secure phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stop. The message was from the same blocked number that had called her earlier. Check the North Garden. 1 hour. Come alone or Lord Chancellor Blackwood dies tonight. Elena showed the message to Lord Chancellor Blackwood, who read it with an expression of grim determination. Elena, you are not going to that meeting. We're going to contact the authorities and, sir, with respect, I don't think we can trust the authorities. Elena's voice was firm but respectful. Whoever is behind this has access to your most private conversations and your personal quarters. They know about classified operations that were known only to a handful of people. That level of access suggests someone at the highest levels of government is involved. Lord Chancellor Blackwood considered her words, and Elena could see the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. What do you propose we do? Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would commit them both to a dangerous course of action. I think I need to go to that meeting, but not alone and not unprepared. We need to find out who we're dealing with and what they really want. Absolutely not. I won't allow you to put yourself in danger because of threats directed at me. Sir, with respect, you don't have a choice. Whoever is behind this has demonstrated that they can reach you anywhere, anytime. Your only chance of survival is to find out who they are and what they want before they decide to stop making demands and start taking action. Lord Chancellor Blackwood was quiet for several minutes, and Elena could see him weighing their limited options. Finally, he looked up with the resolve that had carried him through countless political battles. If you're gonna do this, we're gonna do it right. I'm calling in some favors from people I trust absolutely. People who were with me during the Meridian Project. If there's a leak in the system, it's not coming from them. Elena nodded, grateful that she wouldn't be facing this alone. But as she began to prepare for what promised to be the most dangerous hour of her career, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap that had been years in the making. The North Garden of Blackwood Manor was a secluded area surrounded by high hedges and ancient trees, chosen specifically by the manor's original designers to provide privacy for quiet contemplation. It was also, Elena realized with growing dread, the perfect location for an ambush. As the appointed hour approached, Elena found herself checking and rechecking her equipment. She wore a lightweight bulletproof vest under her jacket, carried her service weapon, and had a small recording device hidden in her clothing. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's trusted allies were positioned around the garden's perimeter, invisible but ready to intervene if things went wrong. But despite all their preparations, Elena had the distinct feeling that they were still several steps behind whoever they were dealing with. The surveillance devices, the threatening messages, the intimate knowledge of classified operations, all of it pointed to an adversary who had been planning this confrontation for a very long time. As Elena made her way toward the North Garden, she wondered if she was about to finally get the answers they desperately needed, or if she was walking into the last hour of her life. Part 4. The North Garden of Blackwood Manor had always been Elena's favorite part of the estate. Ancient oak trees formed a natural canopy overhead, while carefully maintained flower beds created splashes of color throughout the secluded space. A small stone bench sat in the center of the garden, surrounded by hedges that were tall enough to provide complete privacy from the main house. Elena arrived at the garden 15 minutes early, wanting to scout the area and position herself advantageously for whatever confrontation was about to unfold. The October afternoon was growing cold, and a light mist had begun to fall, creating an atmosphere of gloom that matched her mood perfectly. She had been waiting only a few minutes when she heard footsteps approaching along the gravel path. Elena tensed, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon, but she forced herself to remain calm as a figure emerged from the mist. To her complete shock, the person walking toward her was Margaret Chen. "Hello, Elena," Margaret said quietly, her usual warm demeanor replaced by an expression of profound sadness. "I'm sorry it had to come to this." Elena felt the world tilt on its axis. Margaret, whom she had trusted, whom she had confided in just hours earlier, was apparently the person behind the surveillance operation and the threatening messages. The betrayal hit Elena like a physical blow, leaving her struggling to find her voice. "Margaret, why?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Margaret took a seat on the stone bench, her movements careful and deliberate. Elena noticed that Margaret's hands were visible and appeared to be empty, but she remained alert for any sign of a weapon or threat. "Because Lord Chancellor Blackwood is not the man you think he is," Margaret said, her voice carrying a note of pain that seemed genuine. "Because the Meridian Project wasn't what he told you it was. And because sometimes good people have to do terrible things to prevent even worse things from happening." Elena struggled to process what she was hearing. "What are you talking about? What really happened with the Meridian Project?" Margaret was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see her struggling with how much to reveal. "Elena, what if I told you that the Meridian Project wasn't about eliminating terrorist leaders? What if I told you that it was about eliminating people who were investigating government corruption at the highest levels?" Elena felt her world shifting beneath her feet. "That's impossible. Lord Chancellor Blackwood authorized the assassination of 3 investigative journalists and a federal prosecutor who were getting too close to a massive arms-dealing conspiracy involving several high-ranking government officials." Margaret's voice was steady, but Elena could see tears in her eyes. "I have the documentation to prove it, Elena. I've been gathering evidence for 2 years." The Lord Chancellor she knew was a man of integrity, someone who had dedicated his life to public service. The idea that he could be involved in assassinating innocent people was incomprehensible. "You're lying," Elena said. But even as the words left her mouth, she found herself remembering small inconsistencies she had noticed over the years. Conversations that had ended abruptly when she entered a room, meetings that were not recorded in official schedules. "I wish I were," Margaret said sadly. "Elena, I've been Lord Chancellor Blackwood's assistant for 8 years. I've seen things, heard things that gradually painted a picture I didn't want to believe. The surveillance devices you found weren't placed by his enemies. They were placed by me, because I needed evidence of his continued involvement in illegal activities. Even if what you're saying is true, why involve me? Why not go to the authorities?" Margaret laughed bitterly. "Because Lord Chancellor Blackwood isn't working alone. The conspiracy involves people at every level of government, including many of the people you would consider the authorities. I needed someone I could trust, someone with the skills and access necessary to help me gather the final pieces of evidence I need to expose this conspiracy." "And you thought threatening his life was the best way to get my cooperation?" Elena's voice carried more anger than she had intended. "I never threatened his life," Margaret said firmly. "I threatened to expose him, which is very different. Elena, I need you to understand that Lord Chancellor Blackwood is a dangerous man who has had people killed to protect his secrets. The threatening messages he showed you were fabricated to gain your sympathy and cooperation." Elena's head was spinning as she tried to separate truth from lies, facts from manipulation. "Prove it," she said finally. "Show me this evidence you claim to have." Margaret reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet computer. Elena tensed, her hand moving toward her weapon, but Margaret's movements remained slow and non-threatening. "This contains 2 years' worth of documentation," Margaret said, placing the tablet on the bench between them. "Financial records showing payments to known assassins, communication logs detailing the planning of the Meridian Project murders, and audio recordings of Lord Chancellor Blackwood discussing the elimination of people he considered threats to his operation." "Teddy." Elena approached the tablet cautiously, her mind still struggling to process what Margaret was telling her. As she began scrolling through the files, her heart sank. The evidence was extensive and appeared to be legitimate. Financial records showed large payments from government accounts, to offshore companies known to be fronts for criminal organizations. Communication logs, detailed discussions of eliminating problems and permanent solutions to investigative threats. But it was the audio recordings that truly shook Alina to her core. She recognized Lord Chancellor Blackwood's voice immediately, and what she heard made her feel physically sick. "The journalist is getting too close to the Meridian documentation," Lord Chancellor Blackwood's voice said clearly. "We need a permanent solution, and it needs to look accidental." The recording continued with Lord Chancellor Blackwood providing specific details about how the killing should be carried out to avoid suspicion.
"Elena, I know this is devastating," Margaret said gently.
"I know how much you respected him. It took me months to accept what I was seeing and hearing." Elena looked up from the tablet, her face pale with shock and betrayal. "How long have you known?" "I started having suspicions about 18 months ago when I noticed discrepancies between official records and what I was observing firsthand. The full scope of the conspiracy only became clear to me about 6 months ago." Margaret's voice was heavy with regret. "Elena, I need your help to bring this to light. These people have gotten away with murder because they've been able to control the flow of information and eliminate anyone who threatens them." Elena's mind was reeling as she tried to process the magnitude of what Margaret was revealing. If this evidence was authentic, it meant that the man she had dedicated years of her life to protecting was actually a criminal who had ordered the deaths of innocent people. But something still didn't add up. "Margaret, if you've had this evidence for months, why wait until now? Why go through the elaborate surveillance operation and threatening messages?" "Because I needed to be absolutely certain, and I needed to find a way to present the evidence that wouldn't result in it being buried or discredited. Elena, these people control significant portions of the government and law enforcement. Simply turning over evidence to the wrong person could result in it disappearing and me ending up dead." "So what's your plan?" Elena asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "There's a journalist named Rebecca Torres who has been investigating government corruption for years. She's clean, she's fearless, and she has the platform necessary to ensure this story gets the attention it deserves. I've been in contact with her, and she's prepared to publish everything if I can provide corroborating evidence from someone inside the system." If Margaret was telling the truth, she had a moral obligation to help expose Lord Chancellor Blackwood's crimes. But if Margaret was lying or manipulating the evidence, Elena could be destroying the career and reputation of an innocent man. "I need time to verify this information," Elena said finally. "I need to confirm that these recordings and documents are authentic." "But Elena, time is running short. Lord Chancellor Blackwood suspects that someone is gathering evidence against him. If he discovers that I'm involved, he'll take steps to silence me permanently. The same thing will happen to you if he realizes you know the truth." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the danger they were both in. If Lord Chancellor Blackwood was truly capable of ordering assassinations, then her discovery of the surveillance devices and her meeting with Margaret— "What do you want me to do?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "I need you to help me access Lord Chancellor Blackwood's personal safe. There are additional documents there that will complete the picture and provide the final evidence necessary to ensure convictions." Margaret's voice was urgent but steady. "Elena, this is our only chance to stop him before he kills again." Elena looked at the tablet containing the evidence against Lord Chancellor Blackwood, then back at Margaret's earnest face. Everything she thought she knew about loyalty, truth, and justice was crumbling around her. In the space of a few hours, her world had been turned completely upside down. As the mist continued to fall in the garden around them, Elena realized that she was facing the most consequential decision of her life. Whatever choice she made in the next few minutes would determine not only her own future, but potentially the fate of countless innocent people who might become victims of Lord Chancellor Blackwood's conspiracy. The weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable, but Elena knew that she couldn't walk away from the truth no matter how painful it might be. Part 5. Elena spent the remainder of that afternoon in her office, painstakingly reviewing every piece of evidence that Margaret had provided. She cross-referenced financial records with official government databases, analyzed the audio recordings for signs of digital manipulation, and traced communication logs to verify their authenticity. To her growing horror, everything checked out. The evidence against Lord Chancellor Blackwood was not only authentic, but more extensive than Margaret had initially revealed. The conspiracy involved at least a dozen high-ranking government officials and had resulted in the deaths of 7 people over the past 3 years. But Elena's investigation also revealed something that Margaret hadn't told her. Margaret Chen wasn't just an assistant who had stumbled onto evidence of corruption. According to classified personnel files that Elena was able to access through her security clearance, Margaret was actually a deep-cover investigator for the Government Accountability Office, who had been placed in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's office specifically to investigate suspected irregularities in defense contracts. The discovery that Margaret was an undercover investigator actually made Elena feel better about trusting her, but it also raised the stakes significantly. If Margaret's cover had been blown, it would explain Lord Chancellor Blackwood's growing paranoia and his suspicions that someone was gathering evidence against him. Elena's secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Margaret. "He knows. Get out now." Elena's blood turned to ice as she read the message. She immediately began implementing her emergency evacuation protocol, grabbing essential documents and equipment while preparing to leave the manor as quickly as possible. But before she could complete her preparations, her office door opened and Lord Chancellor Blackwood entered, flanked by 2 men Elena didn't recognize. "Elena, I think we need to have another conversation," Lord Chancellor Blackwood said, his voice carrying a coldness she had never heard before. "Please, have a seat." Elena remained standing, her hand moving subtly toward her weapon. "Sir, I was just preparing to conduct a perimeter check of the grounds. I don't think that will be necessary." Lord Chancellor Blackwood gestured to the 2 men who Elena now realized were armed. "Elena, I know about your meeting with Margaret this afternoon. I know what she showed you, and I know what you're thinking." Elena felt her heart racing as she realized the full extent of her predicament. Lord Chancellor Blackwood had somehow discovered her involvement with Margaret's investigation, which meant that her life was now in immediate danger. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to," Elena said, desperately trying to buy time while she assessed her options. Lord Chancellor Blackwood smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Elena, we've worked together for 12 years. Please don't insult my intelligence with denials. Margaret has been feeding you a very convincing story about my alleged involvement in various criminal activities. Are you saying the evidence is fabricated?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "I'm saying that the situation is far more complex than Margaret has led you to believe." Lord Chancellor Blackwood moved to the window and looked out at the grounds below. "Elena, what if I told you that Margaret Chen is actually a foreign intelligence operative who has been working to undermine our national security for the past several years?" Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet once again. "What are you talking about?" "She's actually Li Wei, a Chinese intelligence operative who was inserted into my office as part of a long-term espionage operation designed to gather intelligence on our most sensitive defense programs." Lord Chancellor Blackwood turned back to face Elena. "The evidence she showed you has been carefully fabricated to make me appear to be a criminal so that she can justify stealing classified information." Elena's mind raced as she tried to process this new information. Could Margaret really be a foreign spy? It would explain her sophisticated surveillance capabilities and her intimate knowledge of classified operations. But it didn't explain the extensive evidence she had gathered, evidence that Elena had independently verified. "Sir, even if Margaret is a foreign operative, that doesn't change the fact that the evidence she provided appears to be authentic," Elena said carefully. Lord Chancellor Blackwood nodded approvingly. "Excellent point, Elena. That's exactly the kind of critical thinking that made you such a valuable member of my team." "You're absolutely right. The evidence appears authentic because it is authentic." Elena felt confusion washing over her.
I don't understand. The Meridian Project did involve the elimination of several individuals, but they weren't journalists or prosecutors. They were foreign intelligence operatives who were working to steal American secrets and sell them to hostile nations. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's voice was calm and matter-of-fact. The operation was conducted with full presidential authorization and congressional oversight.
Then why does the evidence suggest otherwise? Elena asked.
Because Margaret has been very clever about editing and contextualizing the information to support her narrative. The financial records are real, but they represent payments to legitimate intelligence contractors, not assassins. The communication logs are real, but they refer to eliminating security threats, not murdering innocent people. Elena felt like she was drowning in competing narratives, each supported by evidence that appeared to be authentic.
Sir, with respect, how do I know you're telling me the truth now?
Lord Chancellor Blackwood smiled, and this time the expression seemed genuine.
Because, Elena, I'm about to prove it to you.
He gestured to one of his companions who handed him a tablet computer.
This contains the complete, unedited files from the Meridian Project, including presidential authorization documents and congressional oversight reports.
The files showed that the Meridian Project had indeed been a legitimate counterintelligence operation, designed to eliminate foreign spies who were stealing American defense secrets.
The individuals who had been killed were not innocent journalists and prosecutors, but confirmed foreign intelligence operatives. But what truly convinced Elena was a series of intercepted communications from Chinese intelligence services discussing their operation to place an agent in Lord Chancellor Blackwood's office.
The communications clearly identified Margaret Chen as Li Wei, a trained operative with years of experience in industrial and government espionage.
Elena, I know this is a lot to process, Lord Chancellor Blackwood said gently.
Margaret is a very sophisticated operative who has been playing a long game. Her goal was to gather enough evidence against me to force me out of office, thereby removing one of the most effective opponents of Chinese intelligence operations in the American government.
Dad, Elena felt a wave of anger washing over her as she realized how thoroughly she had been manipulated. Margaret had played on her sense of justice and her respect for truth to turn her against the man she was supposed to protect.
The betrayal felt even worse than if Lord Chancellor Blackwood had actually been the criminal Margaret claimed he was.
What happens now? Elena asked.
Now we need to apprehend Margaret before she can complete her mission and escape the country, Lord Chancellor Blackwood said. She's planning to transfer the classified information she's gathered to her handlers tonight. If we don't stop her, it will compromise ongoing operations and put American lives at risk.
Elena nodded, her sense of duty and loyalty reasserting itself.
What do you need me to do?
Margaret trusts you. I need you to contact her and arrange another meeting. We'll be ready to take her into custody when she arrives. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's expression was grim but determined. Elena, I know this has been incredibly difficult for you. The fact that you questioned the evidence and demanded proof shows exactly why I've always trusted you.
Elena felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment as she realized that her loyalty to Lord Chancellor Blackwood had been justified all along.
But she also felt a deep sense of betrayal over Margaret's manipulation and deception.
Sir, there's something else you should know,
Elena said.
Margaret mentioned a journalist named Rebecca Torres, who was supposedly prepared to publish the fabricated evidence. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. Lord Chancellor Blackwood nodded. We're already aware of Torres. She's been under surveillance for several weeks as part of our investigation into Margaret's activities.
She'll be arrested along with Margaret tonight.
Elena spent the next several hours working with Lord Chancellor Blackwood's security team to plan Margaret's apprehension. The operation would need to be conducted carefully to ensure that no classified information was compromised and that Margaret didn't have an opportunity to warn her handlers or destroy evidence. As evening approached, Elena sent a carefully crafted message to Margaret requesting an urgent meeting to discuss new evidence she had discovered. The message was designed to convince Margaret that Elena had found additional information that would strengthen their case against Lord Chancellor Blackwood.
Margaret's response was immediate and enthusiastic. She agreed to meet Elena at a safe house location that she provided, claiming that it would be more secure than meeting at the manor again. Elena recognized the address as a property in a secluded area outside of town, perfect for the kind of clandestine meeting that would appeal to a foreign intelligence operative. As Elena prepared to leave for the meeting, Lord Chancellor Blackwood pulled her aside for a final conversation. "Elena, I want you to know how much I appreciate your loyalty and your professionalism throughout this ordeal," he said. "The fact that you were willing to question even me when presented with convincing evidence shows that you're exactly the kind of person we need protecting our national security. Sir, it's been an honor serving under your leadership. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Never apologize for demanding evidence and asking hard questions. That's what separates us from our enemies. We believe in truth and accountability, even when it's uncomfortable." As Elena drove toward the safe house, she reflected on the events of the past day. The experience had shaken her faith in her own judgment and forced her to confront the reality that the world was more complex and dangerous than she had previously understood. But it had also reaffirmed her commitment to protecting the country and the people who served it honorably. When she arrived at the safe house, Elena could see Margaret waiting inside through the lit windows. Lord Chancellor Blackwood's security team was already in position around the property, ready to move in once Elena had confirmed Margaret's presence and intentions. Elena took a deep breath as she approached the front door, knowing that this confrontation would finally bring closure to one of the most challenging cases of her career. Margaret Chen, or Li Wei, was about to learn that her carefully constructed operation had failed, and that the truth had ultimately prevailed over deception. The door opened before Elena could knock, revealing Margaret's familiar face wearing an expression of urgent concern. "Elena, thank God you're here," Margaret said, ushering her inside. "I've discovered something that changes everything. Lord Chancellor Blackwood isn't just a criminal. He's planning something that could start a war." Elena looked into Margaret's eyes and saw the same earnest concern that had convinced her to trust the woman in the first place. For just a moment, she felt a flicker of doubt about the truth she thought she had finally discovered. But then Elena remembered the authenticated documents, the verified intelligence reports, and the overwhelming evidence of Margaret's true identity and mission. Whatever new story Margaret was about to tell, it would be just another layer of deception in an operation that had already come far too close to succeeding. "Margaret," Elena said quietly, "I think it's time for the truth. The real truth this time." Elena saw the understanding dawning in Margaret's eyes as she realized that her cover had been blown and her operation had been compromised. The game that had been playing out for months was finally coming to an end, and only one side would emerge victorious. Outside the safe house, Lord Chancellor Blackwood's security team prepared to move in and apprehend one of the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operatives to penetrate the American government in decades. Elena's loyalty and investigative skills had ultimately protected both her country and the man she had sworn to serve. In the end, truth had prevailed over deception, and justice had triumphed over manipulation. Elena Rodriguez had not only survived one of the most dangerous situations of her career, but had emerged stronger and more committed to protecting the principles she believed in. The case of the surveillance devices had finally been solved, and the real criminals would face the justice they deserved.